Welcome
to our vlogcast.
Did you just call it a vlogcast? Like a vlog podcast? Alright.
Two-headed right, two heads are better than one-headed right. Two heads are better than one-headed right. Two heads are better than one-headed right. Two heads are better than one.
This is our pilot episode of Two-Headed Writer, filmed live from rooms that are right next to each other. But in the coming weeks, I will be moving out to Iowa City and starting classes at the University of Iowa for English and creative writing. So we are learning how to use this software before I go, so that once I'm up there and life is hectic, I won't also have to learn how to use Zoom.
So the idea is that we'll be checking in with each other once a week while you're at school and talking about writing, what we're learning, what we're struggling with, what we've accomplished, and just sharing our journey with the viewers. What have you done in the past week, writing-wise?
Not a lot. So I have a list, a bucket list of things to do while I'm still here in Stillwater, and on that list is finish all of the books that I've received from Owlcrate. If you're here from my other channel, you know what Owlcrate is, but if you're not, Owlcrate is a bookish subscription box that I have a subscription to. They send me a box full of goodies every month, and it includes a mystery book that fits the theme. And I've had Owlcrate for over a year now, and I've been reading some of the books, but not all of them. So I had 10 books from Owlcrate that I hadn't read, that I wanted to get read before the end of the summer. And I just started reading them this week. And so it's actually been really interesting reading a bunch of them back to back, because I've noticed similar tropes that they're a fan of, and I'll be like, oh, I really like this book because this, and this one not so much because this. Going through them back to back is helping me kind of hone down oh, this is the kind of fantasy that I really enjoy and would be interested in writing, and these work and these don't. So yeah.
All right, so name a trope that's on your yes list.
My yes list?
Yes.
I love quests. So the Owlcrate book that I'm reading right now has a quest in it, and that makes me really happy. It's you could compare it to the Percy Jackson style of book, but it's Japanese mythology and it's young adult. So I'm actually, the book that I'm just finished outlining is a quest, and when I was looking up how do quest books work, I found this method where it's you need 15 obstacles. They don't all have to be big monsters, but you need 15 various obstacles in your plot. And so for this book, I've been kind of okay, here's obstacle 1 and here's obstacle 2, right?
For your work in progress, you mean?
Well, for my work in progress, but also reading the Owlcrate book, in my head, I'm keeping track of, okay.
Oh, you're going to see if there are 15.
This obstacle and then this obstacle.
I have a work in progress too. And I've been steadily working on it. My outline is done. My first draft is almost done. I have 5 chapters left to write, and it's the final sequence. So I'm up to the
denouement?
Climax, the climax.
Climax. Okay.
Yeah, the big final sequence where like they've been preparing for this competition, and now tomorrow the competition starts in the morning. Danica has to make a tough choice about what she has to do, what she's willing to do to be able to enter the competition. And there are stakes beyond just winning. And so it's all set up. It's all set up. And now I'm a little nervous because can I pull it off? Like, right? I mean, this is the part I've been working toward writing, and now it's got to be awesome. So that's where I'm at with my work in progress. And then we are working together on Inklings of Ethermore. For our new viewers who are starting at the beginning, we should say, this is the book that you and I started working on when you were like 8 years old. We've written 7 complete drafts of this novel. It's a middle grade fantasy, and we are now querying to try to find an agent. We have 20 rejections under our belt. We've revised it since then. And now with this latest batch, I think we've sent 13 queries out, and we're still looking at sending a few more out before we just wait and see what happens. But it's a process.
Finding agents, it's a lot, especially when they're not 100% clear about what they're looking for, and then you're like, should I query them? Is it worth the time to fill in the form and do the thing? And then our book is fantasy is weird in that there's several like subgenres of fantasy, and our book is a portal fantasy, and so part of it does take place in the real world, and the real world is important in the story, but most of it takes place in our fantasy world. So does that count more toward high fantasy or low fantasy? And some agents don't care, but then some agents are like, not the best fit for high fantasy. And I'm like, well, would you consider our fantasy to be too high for you, madame?
Most of them have more specific but still cryptic wishes on their wish list. But we're getting better at it. We're getting much better at it. I think our query letter is way better than it was the first time.
We've been through more query letter drafts than we have book drafts.
Oh yeah, writing the query letter is the hardest thing, the hardest part of this whole process. It's the hardest piece of writing you'll ever do. You have to boil your whole book down to a couple of paragraphs and write about it in a way that makes somebody really, really want to read it. That's hard. One other thing we're doing is the Neil Gaiman thing.
The masterclass.
So we signed up for a masterclass online, and we're doing the Neil Gaiman masterclass. We're watching it together. We haven't done any of the actual exercises, but we've been watching it together. So.
And we're reading Stardust as well.
What are you taking away from the Neil Gaiman class so far?
Neil Gaiman. He's more helpful than
Judy Blume.
Yes, Neil Gaiman is a lot more concise in his advice than Judy Blume, which is funny because you would think that because of the stuff that they write, it would be the other way around.
I think it makes sense because Judy Blume's books are all about like real people having real people feelings. She's a very touchy-feely writer. She's very kind of, well, you just do it. This is how I do it. And there's certain things she doesn't like. But Neil Gaiman is very logical about it. He's very, here's what you do. He's really thought deeply about what makes a story tick. And I think it makes sense because in fantasy, you make up the rules and then you have to follow your own rules. So you have to think a lot about rule making, and you have to think logically to write fantasy. But Neil Gaiman is great because he gives you pretty concrete things you can do. And I end up watching his lectures, and then I feel like I want to go write a story. I want to take that idea and write a story, and it's inspiring to me. Whereas Judy Blume was just kind of, that's nice. But it's not my genre. Well, that's probably enough stuff to talk about. Anything else you want to throw in?
I don't know. I feel like it would be helpful because you just said not my genre, and we've kind of skated around it. And obviously, we've talked about the genre that our shared book is. But since this is basically the first episode and they don't know us yet, it might be helpful to talk about what kind of stories we individually are interested in writing.
Tell us about your solo project.
So I am primarily interested in writing middle grade and young adult fantasy. I really like so far Stardust because it kind of falls into that category of fantasy that I like, where it's like quirky and inspired by old fairy tales. So Diana Wynne Jones, Patricia C. Reed, Margaret Rogerson, all authors who I really admire for their style. I wouldn't rule out writing contemporary. I just don't usually have fully fleshed out contemporary ideas to like sit down and work on.
Right.
And I want to write stories that have LGBT themes in them because I care.
Well, I am most interested in writing middle grade. I like sci-fi and fantasy. I have a short story that's going to be published, and that we'll probably talk about as we get closer to the end of August. My second draft is due the end of August. It's going to be published in the Brave New Girls anthology. So it's all science fiction with female protagonists. My work in progress is more of a realistic fiction, but it's I don't know if this is a genre or what, but it's a STEM novel. So it's a female protagonist. She's 12. She's really smart, and she wants to be a coder, and she's entering a robotics competition. So there's just a lot of STEM stuff involved. This was inspired by the Danny Dunn series from the 50s and 60s, which I read as a middle school student. He was always getting into some kind of adventure through science. A lot of them I would call more fantasy because the science isn't very good. It's like they make up things that could never possibly happen, like a time machine or
heavily on the fiction side.
Or anti-gravity glue. So I really wanted mine to be more on a realistic side where I could be inspiring kids to pursue science careers. But I want it to be an adventure, and I want it to be a mystery, and I want it to be fun so that anybody could read it and enjoy it. So that's what I'm going for with that one. And then I have various other ideas that range from science fiction to realistic fiction, just depending on what strikes me. But I keep a notebook of ideas, and I will have lots of works in progress soon. All right. Well, we'll come back next week, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about classes you'll be taking.
Yeah.
Progress on our works in progress. If we have any news about finding an agent, all that stuff, we'll just keep this conversation going. And you know what we've learned from Neil Gaiman.
If you don't want to buy a subscription to Masterclass, you don't have to. I'm going to regurgitate it to you.
We'll tell you the whole thing right here. Neil Gaiman says, blah, 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 blah.
If you liked this video and you want to stay with us on our writing journey, consider clicking the subscribe button, also leaving a thumbs up, and also comment down below if you have any questions for us or comments about anything that we talked about today. Are you also working on a novel? Are you also in the middle of querying and it's terrible? Let us know in the comments. One of us will be checking that out. We're sure to respond. We will be back to chat with you guys next week, but until then, remember, two heads are better than one.
You're going to edit this heavily, right?